How does it feel to enter through this portal, or how does it feel to set back into this bay window and watch the world go by? In what position is the person placed who's in this place?
People, have said to us, "Oh, it feels like it's always been there," and yet they really notice it. And I suppose that's the strangely familiar thing that we sometimes talk about. The sense of location or place is really important, and it's part of that. Somehow the building belongs in the place it's in, even if it doesn't belong in a way that people would have predicted. It makes the place feel better rather than worse, or it makes the place more like itself. And that's something we're awful trying to think about. How do we make this place more like itself by putting something in? We believe that the way to do that is not by making something that looks like all the buildings around it, but that somehow is having a kind of meaningful conversation or a cooperative conversation with the surrounding buildings.
We did 2 buildings here at the same time as each other in 2009, which is the Sheila Casey Centre over there in East Wall and the Timberyard housing over here in the Liberties. Designed in the same office, designed by the same hand, in the same city, for 2 different social purposes. But if we were moving the community centre to the Liberties and the housing to the Docklands, it wouldn't be that community centre and that housing. You couldn't translate those 2 buildings as they stand on their functional description. They belong where they are. They are trying to reread the Liberties back to itself and say, imagine the city is one continuous wall of brick with different sized windows looking out into it, that's like a child's memory of the Liberties or something. And in the case of the Docklands, we were trying to evoke that relationship with the silos and sheds behind the wall of the docks and to the landscape of the docks. So you could look at them abstractly and say that's a plan for housing and that's a plan for the community centre, but they're not place interchangeable.
And that's part of the context. I mean, in the Sheila Casey, the housing is 20th century housing, and it's painted these amazing colours, these beautiful colours of kind of pebble dash. And it's laid out in a very geometric pattern, very orderly compared to the Liberties, which is more organically developed. So I think the whole starting points in every way, in terms of the plan and in terms of the expression, grow out of the places that they're in. Yeah, we certainly do spend time, and we use words to try kind of test what our response to a place is. So what is it about it that makes it what it is, that makes it special? And we are interested in trying, we sometimes talk about immersing ourselves in a context at the beginning of a project. But that would include the physical context and its place, its history, but also include social aspects, the brief, what the other uses are, how people already operate in that place.
We like to go at night time when you see things in black and white. We like to go when places are crowded. We like to go, when it's raining. You have to bring the place to sense, in the sense that Yeats meant about come to sense. That you have to sort of shake it to bring it to sense and remind it of its true nature. Sometimes you have to remind civic buildings that they have a civic purpose and they have to sacrifice something back to the public realm. So we often surrender a bit of the site. If you think in front of our Ranelagh School, there's a little yield where that's a new space made just for the threshold. So at a certain point that turns into a hard conversation with someone who says, wait a minute, we want you to have this piece of ground, it seems to be gone. And we're saying, no, what you give away you get back manifold, because now we have the whole street.
The school is a really interesting building type because it's kind of civic, but it's low-scale civic. It's the first place where a child is introduced to society. It's an institution, in the good sense of the word institution. It's where the child encounters, other children in a formal way, and teachers and the world outside. So as a building type, it's quite interesting because it needs to have maybe something just above the domestic, and yet it is in a way homely or something. It's the step between the home and the world. And I think we're probably consciously trying to make a building that embodies that sense.
What I think is important about Ranelagh is that it's not that you notice it first. In fact, it might feel more familiar because of where it stands. It kind of comes back to the essence of its sightedness in Ranelagh. It belongs in Mount Pleasant Square. It's built out of brick. It's got these windows that move like the windows in Georgian houses. It has the feeling of archetype, at least in our heads. And so you know that it's the hard building on the end of the village of Ranelagh before you get to the park, made out of house-scaled elements, but it feels like a little town. There's quite a lot riding on that modesty, a lot of assertions about civicness, publicness. We met in college through writing manifestos to try to change the program we were studying in. That's how we met.
So we're already saying we don't want to do this project.
Yeah. No, we were born like this, I think. No, I think it's true. We recognized each other, not for our flamboyant talents, but for our kind of doggedness.
That's funny. I was going to say dogged.
Were you? Yeah. Yeah. We're just determined to do it the way we want to do it, I think.
Architecture is really about building society or building for society. So whatever the program of the building, in a way, we feel it should contribute or make better the lives of the people who use the building, whether they're living in it or learning in it. One of the things we feel is that buildings, for example, shouldn't be intimidating, and I think a lot of buildings are quite intimidating. So there's a sort of sense that it should feel easy to approach or easy to enter, and so we're very interested sometimes in threshold and extending threshold and having covered outdoor spaces that make it easy for people to kind of hang around before they decide whether to go in the door or not, or that they can kind of gradually get themselves ready to actually go in, rather than feeling you come up to a big sort of shiny edifice and you've got to push your way in through the door.
Architecture should make you feel at home. It doesn't mean it can't be grand or it can't be special, but it has to have some handle on it somewhere that allows you to know how to use it. In certain extreme abstractions, it loses its connection to the humanity that we feel ourselves to be a part of, and we lose interest in it. It might be the familiar strange is what we're putting the emphasis on. We're trying to use the limited vocabulary of everyday architecture, but use it to create unexpected strangeness, to remind people of the depth of beauty there is in the limited vocabulary. So if we could make the familiar feel strange, or make people feel that they're seeing what they know in a new light, they understand it more deeply. That's the motivation.